out with a report in September of 2013 saying, in essence, you guys can't get over the Tehachapies. The gradient is too steep, and your plans are just, it just won't work. And for your own interest, they have done nothing since then to try to change the route or make any alterations or make any changes to meet these scientific and physical problems, major engineering problems. They've done nothing. They tried to suppress the report, and we're told they fired the consultant immediately after the report was issued. They didn't like it. So it's interesting, but it's a major issue in our case.
And it will be admissible, you think?
Yes, the judge has already said it's admissible. Because what happened was that the major expert who says they can get to San Francisco in 2 hours and 40 minutes laid his computer model and analysis and sort of the roadmap for the trip on top of the route that they say it's impossible. They can't do it. So we'll see. But it will definitely be in evidence. It's a big item, and they don't like it, and they've done nothing for it. They rejected 2 times the route over the mountains called I-5 and the Great Pump. 2 times they rejected it, and they settled on this route, which is LA to Burbank to Palmdale to Bakersfield. That's the route that's the expert said is impossible. But anyway, we're very excited finally to have a trial date after all these years. A lot of work. Anxious to get it decided.
Are there other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for accommodating.
I very much appreciate your
Yes.
coming over and being with us.
I'll keep you closely advised how things are going.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the last meeting. You all received them last week together with tonight's agenda. Are there any comments about the minutes?
I have some questions. And I guess this is the time to ask them. I think I have the right. There's a 2-page, I guess this is the printout of the minutes on Wednesday.
Yes, that's correct.
And under 5A, it says discuss the draft hazard analysis. And since Caltrain wasn't able to come that meeting, I'm not sure what that means.
This was the attachment there that was the letter that Caltrain submitted that night. We discussed it briefly, but one reason to have this back on the agenda tonight is with the Caltrain representatives so we can have more input.
Okay, I didn't see that on tonight's agenda.
Oh, hazard analysis update 5E.
It's item 5E.
Oh, okay, in a different order, so I'm sorry, skipped it, okay. So, has this been done that we requested city council for funding to prepare a request for proposal?
Yes, that was requested, I believe, at the July city council meeting, and the city council decided not to move forward with that at this point.
Okay, and then the other one was in 5B, the applicant station. Did that letter go to?
No, actually, in place of the letter, that resulted in the on-site meeting. Can't remember the exact date, but where with the city manager and with Mayor
Okay.
DeGolia.
Got it.
Other questions about the minutes? May I have a motion to approve? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Are these mics on?
Yes.
Yes. observe.
Okay, thank you.
Make a public comment.
See, the mics are on.
Well, you might wanna use the mic so that the recording picks it up.
I suppose we ought to bend that down a little ways. Okay, then we move on to the regular agenda, which brings Casey to the forefront. The status of the Atherton Station maintenance and repair activities.
It'd be easier if I stood up here.
I'd be happy to have you come up. There's a seat there that's already warm.
How about I stand up here and then you guys can all see me well.
You're too used to delivering things that way.
When you put the timer on.
Well, I'm happy to come to the table if you want me at the table. But
It's comfortable for you.
alright, well, I'll just stay here for now. So since I was last here, we've met twice. We met once with Michael and then council members, and then we met again recently, and that was just a few weeks ago. Another in-person meeting. At that one, there was several members of the rail committee. It was Paul Jones and Rosemary at that meeting to discuss the activities that are happening there. We're continuing to make progress on the work. You can see it's slow, but it's steady, and they're making these improvements that we've discussed.
I almost applauded today when the guy was out there diligently working. I was so impressed.
So everyone is still moving on that track to have all of the elements that we've talked about complete by the end of September. And that was captured in the letter that's been sent, the original one. I'm repeating it again tonight, and that was also what we delivered at the last meeting. So we're being pretty consistent that by the end of September, we'll have the windows fully complete. The little frames will be in place. They'll be the right color paint. And then they're also working on the areas where they found rotted wood. And so they're patching those up and making sure that the building will be sound in those areas.
How are they patching the dry rot there? Are they replacing the wood, or are they putting wood substitution in there? What's the process? I see some of them are covered up with paint, so you can't see what they did.
Yeah, I would have to get a breakdown from our contractors of exactly what the process is, but I know they are replacing some of the wood, which is part of the reason why it's taken so much time, is they want to make sure the wood matches it, and some of these items have been specialty pieces that they needed to order.
Right.
So they're not just throwing any old piece of wood in there.
Well, we'd be grateful for a little detail on that if you could do that for us.
Sure.
Is it okay to ask her questions at this point about
Yes,
that?
yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned the window frames, they have, well, I'm not sure for how long, but a few weeks ago, they have put in something that's, looks to me like maybe a plastic or rubbery substance over what in some cases was just bare metal left. Is that the new?
No.
That's
No, they're going to have it so it matches. I've spent a decent amount of time looking at the Atherton windows. So it's the Atherton window frame along the side. And you had originally pointed out that a couple of them were just a metal that's left behind, and it didn't have that little piece that goes on the corner.
It used to be metal.
And so they're going to fix it so it matches and is uniform throughout the station, so that it has all of the... Help me with the word for it. It's like the molding, the window, the frame molding.
Yeah, I've called it frames, and I'm not.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
kind of the
know. I
molding
don't
that
know
goes
all the
around the
jargon
glass.
here. Is there somebody in the subcontractors that you use, the Transamerica, I guess it is?
Transit
That-
America.
Is that not right?
Transit America.
Transit America, oh right. That is sort of a specialist or does most of your work in the restoration of the stations that do have a historical component, such as ours. Is there someone that?
Yes, there is, and he's been the person working on the Atherton station. Even though Atherton isn't officially designated a historic station, it has many of those elements, and I know, it's an older station, so he has been personally involved on this station work as well.
I don't mean carpenter, I mean somebody, you know, is that what you meant?
Yes, he does all of the restoration work on our other historic stations, and so he
Yeah,
was.
I didn't mean that, I meant somebody that is more of a design person or looks at the whole building or something like that. I wondered if, I thought I heard somebody say that they thought there was one that worked for Caltrain, and you're
As
not
part
aware of one?
as part of his job, he does have to appreciate and follow historic standards at the other stations, and so he knows it's not just about the wood; it is a bigger picture, and so he's had experience
A
doing
man
that.
actually working,
He's with Tazi.
hammering or painting or whatever.
I think he does.
He's not just an office person, he's not an
Yeah.
administrator.
No, he does both. He's out there in the field looking at things.
One of the reasons I inquired, besides it's just the general nature of that building, it's different. Sort of this era in the 20s or 30s when it was last redone, is that the panels that they're putting on at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones in the original building that is bounded by the pillars.
Mm-hmm.
They have a certain kind of bottom panel that's divided.
Mm-hmm.
And the new panels that are being, and I don't know if these are temporary because there is milled wood yet to come, or if these are the ones that are gonna be there, but whatever, what you look at now are solid pieces in the rectangle, not divided. Now, in the middle of the station, in the oldest part of it, where those pillars are, they have 3 divided segments. On the outside, on both ends, I'm talking about the west side, this side that you see the most of, those don't have any. And my guess is they probably didn't, they were probably put in when those 2 ends of the building were added, those were plain also, the way the ones that they replaced, I think, now are. But on the north and south ends of the building, if you look at the south end of the building, there are 2 of those big rectangles, and they are both divided just like the ones in the middle of the building are. But on the north end, they put in a single one that isn't divided and right next to the one that is divided. So all I'm saying is that it isn't consistent, and I would think somebody, and I've lived here so long and looked at that depot for so many years, I probably have pictures someplace that show, but I haven't gone back and looked that up yet. But my guess is the north and end panels should be the same, and should be the same as they were originally. So I would suggest that somebody ought to take a look at that north end where they put the new one in that isn't a divided one. And I also don't know, because we don't have a written statement of your plans, whether they plan to make it look like the other one. So, you know, maybe there's another step yet that's to come, and you just can't see it right now. But somebody ought to take a look at that. It would be helpful.
This is a new topic for me that you're just raising, so after this meeting I'll go over to the station to make sure I understand what you were meaning about the different segments and divided or not for that paneling, and I will report back.
Okay, are there other questions?
I'm glad for getting some stuff done, because you can see the people are working. So is she gonna cover CBOS?
Are we ready to proceed? Yeah, let's move on to the CBOS update. And
Well,
I
there
wanna-
was a 5B, discussion regarding longer-term
Oh.
state maintenance,
Oh, I
station
beg your
maintenance.
pardon. There is indeed, thank you.
Okay. So the purpose of 5B is in the course of, several on-site meetings with members of the rail committee and staff, there, and with Caltrain. A lot of discussion really was about the level of effort and, the amount of maintenance that's going on at the station. Caltrain has been very clear that, they have a budget, as with, they have a budget, for all the stations in their system. And so, what became apparent to some of us is that there just may be a disconnect between the level of maintenance that the town is desiring versus the level of maintenance that is, being budgeted for. And so the purpose of this item is really to have a discussion with the committee to see if there's, any interest or recommendations to the council with regards to, potentially the council, the city, the town of Atherton becoming kind of a partner, so to speak, and contributing towards, the maintenance and repair of the station, so that it, to improve the appearance, increase the standards. So that's the purpose of this item.
And one of the issues here, of course, is that the station will be immediately adjacent to the new town center and will be part of the town center group of buildings and structures. And there's some interest in seeing that the station is compatible with the town center and that it's a complement to it instead of a distraction from it.
I met with the mayor and in his open hours, I'm not sure what he calls them, but the ones that he has every week. And Mr. Rodriguez happened to be there too. And we had quite a bit of discussion. I think Casey had been here by then, and we looked at all this. And I came away from that meeting, and the mayor said that there was some surplus in the town budget that they had to decide how to use effectively and constructively for the residents. And so I propose that we recommend to the city council that before we make any joint arrangement with Caltrain for maintenance of the Atherton station, that we hire a structural engineer to evaluate the condition of the building and provide an estimate of what it would cost to put it in sound, functional, and attractive shape, which would, if properly and regularly maintained, serve the community for several decades to come. And the restoration should be to its original shape, which I think is where it's being headed now. But I think that unless we do a top-down, the tile roof, ceiling, and then deal with all that rotted wood that's almost in the foundation or that connects it to the foundation, we won't, it could be just look a whole lot better, but not stand up well. And that maybe if we had a structural engineer that's objective about looking at that building and giving us an estimate of what it would cost, then we could talk a little bit better and more effectively with Caltrain about what to do about fixing it right now so that it would last.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect, Rosie?
I move, do you want me to read it again? I move that we recommend to.
Do you have it?
Well, what I have here is kind of a
Okay, well, let's.
USA Today version of it, but just to recommendation to hire a structural engineer to assess the current condition and restoration requirements of the station and to develop a cost estimate of repair.
And this would be cost borne by the town?
Correct.
Isn't that what they're doing now?
No, they're just doing repair work.
You agree with that, Katie?
Yeah, Caltrain's doing repair work and Caltrain is paying for it.
So it's not the depth that they're talking about here?
That's the question.
That's what you would take somebody who's.
She said they had a person who was skilled in these type of buildings working on it, is that right?
Right, but they're not doing an overall assessment of the entire thing to repair it. They're doing select repairs based on the feedback we'd heard earlier of what needed immediate work.
Alright, so this motion's not contrary to what you're doing?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It depends on,
Well, they're doing something, I don't wanna, pass a motion to do what they're already doing, so that's all.
I think it's more
maybe the-
holistic, I would say. It's,
Maybe the question should be, have they done any assessment of it? If they haven't, they're just doing general maintenance, but I don't believe that they checked the structural integrity of the site, because that's not in their.
Sure, I mean,
That's
then
more
is
than
it up to
surface,
seismic
more than
code
land.
and everything
If it was
else?
dangerous, if there was a danger, I'm sure they would already have addressed it, but since it's, what they're basically doing is general maintenance issues, if there was structural issues that were very apparent, and that if there was general public concern, they would deal with it, but what you're asking for is to assess the structural issues, to determine what the actual condition of the building is, to determine what we should do as a town. In case it's falling over, it doesn't make sense to put a whole lot of money into something if it's already decayed past the point of restoration. It would be a rebuild. So you need to know that before you, I'm assuming that's what you're saying. I understand where they are, their assessment would be if there was a concern, but generally they're just doing generalized maintenance. You wanna know if there's structural issues that would affect.
well, yeah, because I think if you go over there and just as a layperson, as I certainly am about buildings, you see that there's serious rot at the bottom of these walls, of these corners and stuff. And yet some nice improvement stuff going on around it. And I don't know, maybe it's still in the plans, but we don't have that information. And I think if we're going to go to the step of saying, hey, shall we share the finances of keeping up something that belongs to Caltrain, but's in the middle of our town, so that there are obviously two very involved parties here. Before we sink our town's money into it, we should know what that might cost and whether or not it's necessary, or what could be done to be a.
It is a prudent question.
I was just wondering if there are any seismic issues that have to be addressed. I think there are in some cases when buildings are being remodeled, they have to be brought up to some sort of seismic code. I haven't heard that mentioned yet, but that could involve a lot of expense, couldn't it?
well, that could be part of the structural engineering assessment. They should be, they're generally qualified to make seismic judgments. They could at least identify what needed to be done.
I think that building is worth it to Atherton. We don't have very many like that we have to worry about improving. And we've got the civic center ones, well, at least they're working on it, the ones that did need to be fixed. And it's not very big, I don't know how, even seismic upgrading, I don't know how expensive that
What,
could be.
in my opinion, what you're requesting isn't gonna be an extensive, study or cost. It's not a complex structure. It's basically a plan. I think it can be easily done. And for a licensed structural engineer to come in and, just inspect it for compliance to current building codes and the current condition, and just basically develop a three or four page memorandum with their findings and recommendations and estimated cost.
Let's see what the outcome is.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fairly simple thing to do.
Does our motion read that we're recommending the city council to retain the structural engineer for this work?
Yes.
Good. Are there any other comments concerning this?
You don't have anybody on your staff that could do that?
Yes, we actually do. And and again, this is not a complex structure. It's not.
So
Do we have a structural engineer on the staff?
We are your contract staff, and yes, we have numerous structural engineers on our staff.
We
So
can
you
get
guys
any,
can do
we
it.
can get any,
Yes.
that's basically.
I just
Oh,
want.
but you still have to authorize it,
Yes.
Absolutely.
I
Have to
see,
pay for
okay.
it outside the.
Because it's outside the
Outside our
contract.
scope, yeah.
Correct.
I see.
Are there other comments? Now we can get on to the CBOS update. We've given you a rest. Back to work. I have a question of concern to me personally.
Mhm.
At the last Joint Powers Board meeting, there was a comment by Miriam Lee that there were some problems with the software that was being developed by GE.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering particularly about that because those of us who have had anything to do with the design and installation of software know that when you pick up the corner of the rug, you often find a terrible problem inside somewhere.
Mhm. I think that they are going through the testing phase right now with the software, and so they're going through different iterations of it, and it takes time. So
Well,
they're
yes, I should agree.
they're still doing that right now.
So
The
the
project.
software is complete to the extent that they're testing it, but of course changes are being introduced while they test it.
Yes, I believe that that's accurate. That they add different components onto it and test it and build it out. And so where the overall project is right now is most of the installation elements are complete along the corridor, and in Atherton they're all complete with all the installation elements, and now they are moving into the testing phase. So they're testing the different elements to make sure everyone's talking to each other, and also testing the software too to make sure that has all the functionality they expect it to.
Are they still testing, they told us they were going to test in the month of March, but then I saw something else that said it was going to go longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I read something very recently that sounds as if it's sort of indefinite, that they will be running engines back and forth at night.
Yeah.
Is
So
that
we've
still
had
going on?
multiple different test phases. There was a test phase that occurred in Atherton where they were testing specific crossings, and so they were running a test train at night between specific crossings to make sure that the function was working. They've done, a variety of tests, and I only really talk about the public ones because that's the ones I know about as well. So now they're moved into the phase where they're using a test train to test all of the elements. And so they've started in the southern portion of the corridor in the San Jose to Sunnyvale area, and they're using a test train again at night, not to just cover certain crossings, but to go through a longer stretch of the corridor to make sure everything's talking to each other. They're going to continue to move north, and so they will get through Atherton and test all the components that way as well, but they're not here yet. Every week on our website, we update where the testing's going to occur, and so that's the best place to test if it's happening here or in a different, or the best place to look if it's happening here or in a different area.
What is the search we go through to get to that point? Do you know, Casey?
Yeah, I can. And I actually think that it was also listed, it's in your meeting minutes, because it was on the one pager that I had sent last time.
Okay.
Oh, actually it's not. I apologize for that. So it's www.caltrain.com/CBOSS, CBOSS. And it's not listed exactly here, but that'll give you the direct page to where you can get that
Is CBOSS
information.
in caps or lowercase?
It'll come up either way.
Either way?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Michael, maybe if it's helpful to you to send that link to the rail committee.
Sure, if you can.
Yeah, I'll email it to you. And you can always call me, and I'll tell you where the testing is as well.
Okay, very cool. That's more fun than Are there questions about CBOSS?
That was quite a comment he made. I assume that the management reacted to it about the quality of the software.
Were you thinking of Roland's comment?
Yes. That's probably the strongest comment I've ever heard at those meetings. So I don't know whether there's any validity to it, but I certainly, if I was on the other side of the table, I'd be concerned.
Mhm.
And I assume that you are. Because you're doing testing to make sure it works.
We're doing testing right now to make sure the system
He
works.
condemned it pretty bad.
Mhm.
And he's been in the business all his life, so I don't know. It's hard to see. That's enough.
Mhm.
to inform them on the C-bus testing. And I'm going to read what it says here, not the whole thing. The following crossings will be tested: 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 9th Avenue, Fair Oaks Lane, Watkins Avenue, Encinal, Glenwood, Oak Grove, Menlo Park, etc. To test these crossings, a train will run 4 miles on either side of the crossings, traveling through Millbrae, Burlingame, San Mateo, Belmont, San Carlos, Redwood City, unincorporated San Mateo County, Menlo Park, and Palo Alto. Do you notice anything missing from that line? Now,
I don't read.
if you're wondering why does Atherton feel left out, and you took away our train service, and now it's like we don't even exist. I mean, I know Caltrain has its problems with Atherton, but the problems go both ways. That's all.
Rest your case.
Well, I apologize for not having Atherton listed there.
Just note that our feelings are hurt.
Noted.
Are there other questions about C-Bus? All right, let's move on to the electrification project. And I would like to ask, do you have any agreement with high-speed rail as to when you'll start to get their money?
Start taking
Which
what?
part of their money?
Well, the money that's being contributed, the $600 million for the electrification.
We're working on that now, and it should be finalized in the near future. The update that Marion Lee gave to the board last month outlined the funding strategy for the program and how to fill the funding gap and where those sources would be coming from. And so over the next couple months, we'll be firming up how we fill the funding gap for the program and also solidifying any of the other previous sources that we had in our funding plan, such as the Air District Board recently approved $20 million for the project, and that was originally in the funding plan, but until they took that action in July, I believe it was, I think it was July, that didn't become more finalized. So there's a variety of different partners that we're working with on this project to fund it, to be able to move forward with it, and we're still working on some of those pieces. But we need to have them in place in order to award a contract, which right now we expect to do that for the design build contract in November. So before November, we expect to have the right commitments in place.
You've got some very expensive consultants on there, a lot of financial obligation ahead of you. I would expect you to be a little bit uneasy about all this, but I don't know.
I don't know if that's a question. I mean, we're
Well,
confident
no,
with.
it's- yeah, do you feel reasonably secure that this will all fall into place?
Yes.
Is there a high level of confidence in the funding plan?
Yes, there is.
Isn't this money supposed to come from Prop 1A bond funds?
Some of it.
And aren't there constraints on whether the bonds can be sold or whether those funds can be spent that are part of this that have to be addressed? I don't think it can just be negotiated between Caltrain and the High Speed Rail Authority. I think that the state is involved and the authorities that have to approve the issuance of the bonds and the spending of the bond money.
They're all involved.
Other questions of Casey on this topic?
Is this the electrification?
Just the electrification, that's correct.
Yeah, I have a question. This has been postponed for at least a decade. It keeps coming up and there's never enough money. Then it gets postponed and it comes up again, there's never enough money. Is Caltrain ever gonna work on a plan B that defines what might be done with the money that's available? Seems to me you've completely ignored any alternatives to electrification, and you've passed up a lot of benefits that could be achieved over the last decade or more
Caltrain has, as an agency, capital funds and operating funds that go to improving the corridor that's out there today, such as there was money invested in additional diesel trains so we can expand capacity, because right now people are standing on our trains and they're demanding right now to be able to improve it. But through the environmental process for the more long-term solution to the capacity and all the other reasons why electrification was chosen as the right path forward for the project, that's the path that we're on. That was what was environmentally cleared, and that's where the money is, scheduled to be spent on. Now, if there is a lawsuit or something breaks down with our funding partners, we'll have to reassess everything. But right now, there's a plan, there's a process that's taken place, and that's the path that Caltrain's on.
So the answer is there's no plan B. Is that right?
Well, I don't know what your plan B is, but we've outlined what our plan A is and what we're moving
If you haven't got
towards.
enough money to electrify.
We'll have to reassess then everything, because a lot of our funding commitments are also towards this plan. And so if we weren't electrifying, not sure what Caltrain would do.
Well, I guess another way of stating it is what happens if you don't get the money?
We'll have to
'Cause you got
reassess.
600 million committed, is that right?
That's right.
So, I mean, you almost force yourself into a plan B on a worst case scenario on a planning basis, but I don't have any suggestions, but I just think that it's almost like Jack is raising the issue. It seems to me you gotta think of a plan B, and I gotta believe you have, but it's not public. Cause if you don't get the money, that 600 million is just not gonna sit there. Although you got 400 million in the bank, which I still haven't quite figured out. The Transportation Authority has 400 million.
Yeah, that's a different agency.
Well, I know, but its primary purpose is to fund transportation projects in San Mateo County. So there's there's a Dumbarton Bridge money in there, 50 million. And there's other funds available, and I still don't know what the other 350 million is for, but it must be designated for something.
I'm not sure which funds you're referring to at the Transportation
I'm
Authority.
just talking about the cash balance in the Transportation Authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's 400 million. And no one's ever explained to me what it is for. They always say, well, it's committed. Well, I don't know. It may be, but it's not apparent to me what it's committed for. And it seems to me if its commitment is less important than electrification, you got 400 million right there. But I'll leave that to you.
Other questions? Let's move on to the last item here, which is the hazard analysis update. You wrote in your letter to us that you've been going through a careful assessment of the different grade crossings on the system to try and rank them according to hazard. Could you tell us a little bit about how that's done?
I'm partly going to read off the bullet points that were in that last notes that were prepared for the meeting. So the objective was to identify and evaluate grade crossing safety and hazards using Federal Railroad Administration-based risk methodology. So all of the grade crossings. The process was to assess the conditions, including site visits, which were usually jointly held with city staff in each of the cities. There was a hazard analysis performed, evaluation of the risk. They identified risk mitigation measures, and then there was a recommendation process that prioritized the grade crossings based on risk and on average daily traffic counts. So through that process, there was a recommendation of the top 11 crossings based on average traffic counts to be funded in the budget.
Is there a copy of this report that could be available?
I'll see if we can make that available.
When was this evaluation done? Do you know, Casey?
It was done this year.
this year.
this year, and it may have even carried into last year as well as part of the
Well,
process, because it was several.
It's current, that's what I
Yes,
was.
it is
So it was
current.
after Fair Oaks had quad gates.
Yes. And you can see for the last bullet point, and if what you're really interested is in the Atherton related crossings, we can just pull out the information there. And you can see Fair Oaks ranked 29th out of 42 crossings, and Watson Avenue ranked 36 out of 42 crossings. So each crossing had individual recommendations that were suggested to how to make the crossing, improve the safety of the crossing. And some cities have asked for meetings to get better understand them, because sometimes the recommendations are either or. They're not, you have to do these 5 things. It may be, you should do this one, and if you do this, then you won't need to do that one. So before any of them are implemented, there's a coordination that's needed at the local level to make sure the right improvements are in there. And so if what you're really looking for is some more detail about the Atherton ones.
Well, we're looking for that, we're also looking for more information on how the criteria were evaluated and what sort of a process you had for ranking. It's always possible to get the answer you want if you make the process sufficiently opaque.
Well, I
Not
think
that I'm accusing Caltrain of anything, but it's,
yeah. Well, I think a key part of the process was the crossings that have the most traffic, so they have the highest risk potential of incidents happening at them.
well, that assumes that the risk potential is uniform across the crossings, and that's not true.
No, there's a variety of elements that go into the evaluation, but where
That's
some
what
of the
we'd
cutoff
like to
was.
see. We'd like to be able to look at that and look at how you ranked some of the other crossings and take a look at the crossings, and we may come back and say we don't agree with everything you've done.
Well, one area, trying to get to the point where I think you'll want to go, is you want improvements at the Atherton's crossings,
Well,
correct?
we're interested in seeing how our crossings rank, and if we're making a lot of noise about quad gates on Watkins, and it's really down at the bottom of your list, which you indicate, we should go away quietly.
Mhm.
But if we can look at the methods you used in providing that ranking and see that there may be some considerations other than those that were raised, then we'd like to be able to introduce those and perhaps influence your thinking, or perhaps let you correct us in our thinking.
Okay.
We have no, we're not going after you, we just want to
Yeah, better
be
understand it.
sure that it is done in a manner that's fair to our crossing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll see if we can make that available. One thing I do know about it, which may not be a surprise, one element that could make at-grade crossing safer would be a grade separation as a suggested improvement.
Well, of
And
course,
that level
that
of,
sort of takes them out of the mix, doesn't it? by
right.
the time
So
you
things
grade
like that
separate
were not included in it. So
them.
it's
Well, they
more
should not.
focused, less costly suggestions. But I'll see if we can make that available to you.
For example, Watkins has very serious visibility
Hmm.
problems.
Yeah, no, and I believe those were taken into account.
We'd like to see how those were taken into account,
Yeah.
just as an example.
Well, that must be just public information, isn't it? Can't you just request it?
Well, that's
what
what,
we just did.
yeah, that's what you're doing.
Freedom of information, you could,
Yeah.
but if she's doing it voluntarily, it doesn't.
Yeah,
No,
I'll look into it.
we want to do this in a friendly
Well,
way.
Michael, did you participate in this exercise?
Yeah, what staff participated in is back in November of 2014, we were notified that a field assessment was going to be done.
Mhm.
Gordon Siebert from our staff, went out with whoever the people were, and then based on that, we received basically a 2-page, pretty much a standard report for each crossing, one for Fair Oaks and one for Watkins, which was included in your May Rail Committee packet. And we have not, to my knowledge, we have not heard anything since then. So if ranking has occurred, we're not aware of it. If there was a report that was approved, that's something that we haven't been, we're not aware of. The only thing I can tell you is that we were present at the field review back in November of 2014.
Yeah, and there were, I know just from working with other cities, sometimes there was additional elements that were discussed after the field assessment too that could be helpful. So we do have, a more complete picture for each of the crossings, and as I said, we're happy to do a deeper dive on Atherton, but I think what you're looking for is more of an overall
We
idea
like to
of
go back and look at all the rules and
Mhm.
see how they were used.
Mhm.
I'd like to, at one of the JPB meetings, probably 2 or 3 months ago, there was a gentleman there from High Speed Rail. And he publicly stated that they were gonna start doing quad gates on every intersection on the peninsula.
Mhm.
And they were gonna pay for it. Is that it? Did I dream that up, or did that actually happen?
Yeah, at the California High-Speed Rail Authority board meeting, I think it was a couple board meetings ago, they had a presentation which is on their website specifically about at-grade crossings on their proposed route and where they were planning to do grade separations, especially for the long term. I believe they indicated they would do it everywhere, but for more short-term ones, they indicated that they would like to put in quad gates at all at-grade crossings.
Well, is that part of your thinking on this evaluation of the intersection?
This is independent of high-speed rail. This is Caltrain's assessment and what Caltrain's committed to doing over time for each of these crossings.
Well, do you know the status of high-speed rail? Are they thinking of doing it? Because he talked within 2 years.
So it's part of high-speed rail's environmental work that they need to do on the corridor and their planning effort for what the blended system will look like. And I think as part of that, that's what they're referring to as quad grades. If they're planning on doing something outside of that process, they would need to work with Caltrain since we own the right-of-way to implement that. But right now,
You remember the person in the meeting?
Ben,
Could you ask him whether he's gonna do something in the next 2 years? Or whether it's just, when he was misquoted, or?
no, so high-speed rail is laying out a process for doing work on the peninsula as part of the blended system process. So the blended system being high-speed rail and Caltrain. And they have not kicked off that process yet. And so I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, but the presentation clearly outlines that they do want to put in quad gates at all at-grade crossings along the corridor. But they can't just come in and do that right now. They're going to set up a process for that.
Well, they have to
Because
do
so-
that if they're gonna run it 110 miles an hour. That's a federal requirement.
Financially, Caltrain still says it's totally separate from High Speed Rail Authority, is that correct?
Financially, no. So this specific Caltrain hazard analysis program, this is a Caltrain agency process. Just like Caltrain right now fixes its ties that are out on the tracks or fixes a station. This is things that Caltrain agency does. And so as a Caltrain agency, we wanted to look at all of our crossings to see if there was things we could do to improve it. So
They're
that's what
doing
this
that
program.
with their own money.
So
This is
yes,
Caltrain
Caltrain's
money.
own money doing that. Now this quad gate suggestion has been raised by High Speed Rail as something they would like to do in the future and potentially on this corridor. And so they'll need to go through a process in order to implement that. And that would likely be with with High Speed Rail's money.
Completely
Yes.
independent of Caltrain.
Pardon?
Completely independent of their processes.
Well, should we get them to join us and explain what their plans are?
If you'd like High Speed Rail to come in for a presentation, you can ask them. They go most
Because he was
places.
very adamant,
I think
within
that's
2 years.
premature.
I pinned him to the wall, and he said within 2 years. So I mean, he's
I mean,
gonna do it.
you're welcome to ask High Speed Rail to come here. I don't
Do
know
you
when the
know who
last
it
time
was?
they had an invitation to come. Yes, I do. It's their Northern Regional
Well,
Director.
Mike, will you agree we wanna ask him, Paul?
It would be interesting if it would come.
Well, I would certainly make a lot of progress on
Code.
Yes, if that's the wish of the committee, then we would be
Is that
happy
what
to.
you're asking for?
Yeah.
Craig?
And she'll give you the name and who it was.
It's Ben Traposa, right? And,
You know who it is then?
yes.
Yeah, because he was very cordial and very positive, so I mean, it wasn't a big deal. He was gonna do it. You know, it was very,
It wasn't his money.
Right.
well, it was his money. It's his high-speed rail.
But
Not his
it's
right of way,
their
though, either.
corridor. JPD owns the corridor, that if they, I don't know, I find it all very confusing, they call it a blended system. But we're talking about two separate pockets of money. And yet this man is talking about paying for, quad gates up and down the corridor.
So I think you could think of it this way, and again, this is just my interpretation. I think it would be best if you got this from High Speed Rail, but the blended system could have lots of different elements to it, including quad gates, including high speed rail trains, including whatever other elements they need as part of that. And so they're going to start to define that in the near future, and so it could capture a variety of things, including quad gates, which I know is something that the city is very interested in having as soon as possible.
But don't you think there are so many pieces to the puzzle that a simple request for the man to come and tell us what,
Hey, you gotta start someplace.
Yeah, and the presentation that mentions quad gates and high speed rails plans are on the website, and I'm happy to forward that to you as well. I mean, that might be educational, and I think it's very similar to what Ben said.
Oh,
Looking for a little
Why don't
nugget,
we-
and
why don't we
I
start
saw
with
one
that?
there, so
If you forward that, we'll review the website and decide whether we want to ask him or not.
you know the guy?
I personally don't, but he was a longtime staff member with the City of San Jose Public Works Department, where Gordon Siebert worked for many, many years, so Gordon knows him very well.
And he comes to the CSCG meetings often. So we have the city staff level meetings, so we can coordinate with cities every month, and Ben often attends those as well. So if people have questions there, they can also ask him.
That'd be great.
What's his name again?
Ben Trapoltis.
Is that good?
I can write down his last name for you.
Yeah,
And if you went on their website, he's the Northern Regional Director for the High Speed Rail Authority.
Is the sense of the committee that we'd like to ask him to come to our next meeting?
I vote for it.
Malcolm? Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so.
Yeah,
Sure.
can't hurt, might help.
Jim?
That probably can't hurt.
Okay, yes, what's that?
Done.
Done, okay, thank you very much. I think we've now exhausted Casey. We didn't really mean to have you up there for us to shoot darts at you all evening.
This way you could see me well. I'm a little shorter, so standing up here, you guys all had
But
my full attention.
I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank you for the information that you brought. We'll look forward to some of the things that we
And Mr. Arnett did agree to come at our next meeting, October 6th. You might remind him of that.
I will
Because
check
I've
on
reminded him
that.
several times, and I don't think that I've really got through to him, but I think he agreed, reluctantly.
We're now up to the session on committee and staff member comments. Mike, do you want to lead off? Do you have comments?
I do not.
Malcolm? Right?
Well, this week has been quite a week because the city of Palo Alto had a session Monday night, and I read about it in the paper, so I went to the meeting. And somewhere in the wee hours of the morning, they finally got to the item. And they had to decide what projects they were going to designate for the county of Santa Clara for a sales tax, a half-cent sales tax that they're gonna put on the ballot next year. Now, they've done this twice before, and both times they were squeezed out and all the money went to Barton. And they are livid. But be that as it may, in good faith, they made the selection of 4 projects to be included included, and the number one project was to put the train in a trench for $527 million. And the second project was bicycles or something else, but it was clear that 5 of the members of the 9-person board, of which only 8 were there, were strongly wanted to do that. Otherwise, they wanted to put forth that project, which I was, and I testified along with 15 other people, making various comments, and that was my comment was, hey, you guys have done great things to shut down these fatalities, but this is the best way, put it in the trench and be done with it. And so, much to my surprise, 3 hours into the evening, they each of them made their comments, and I was just really surprised that they finally put that number one. So, I've talked to other members on the committee here about, and I said that I thought Atherton was supportive of doing something to avoid having the high-speed rail going through the, at surface, at the ground. But I didn't say what. But, and I talked to one of the council members in Menlo, and at the meeting I said that Menlo really has no choice. They've got a problem with Ravenswood, it's so big that they're gonna have to do something. And they realize it, but it's not clear what they're gonna do either, but a trench would certainly solve their problem. And our trench would certainly solve most of our concerns, I think.
Sure, come up with Virginia.
When the Palo Alto representative discussed the trench project with us, some meetings ago, we asked specifically about money, and he said he hoped the money would come.
They say what?
He hoped the money would come. They had none in prospect.
Well, yeah, but I think that's what's happened is that the county has stepped in and said, we need your projects, we're going for a sales tax increase for transportation only.
Oh, okay, well, does
So
that
the
work?
money came from heaven, asking them, but they're really ticked off because they've done this twice before and never got the money.
Well, and this trench is strictly South Palo Alto. It's not, University Avenue, it's not, connected to, Menlo Park across the creek. This is really the southern end of the line for them.
You mean it would come back to the surface
Come
by the
back
time
to-
it got to,
Yeah, to
Alma?
California Avenue.
No, I think
California
that,
Avenue,
I think this would go all the way to the university.
Well, that's longer than the, plan that was, given to us,
I think probably it is.
because university is grade separated.
Well, I was quite surprised and but quite pleased, and and I think that if Atherton put forth something, because I think we're talking about $500 million for Menlo and Atherton. Now, Menlo has the possibility of doing a sales tax, and one of the Palo Alto members threatened that they said if they didn't do it this time, if they didn't give them the money, that they would put their own sales tax on Palo, because they've got a big enough community that they could put a sales tax on Palo Alto alone and raise money and stay out of the other one. But she was ticked when she said that, but that's certainly something that Menlo could do. Or they could do a parcel tax, or we could do a parcel tax to raise $500
We'd
million.
have to use a parcel tax. We can't do it with, sales tax.
Right, we'd have to do a parcel tax. And, we put some numbers down, and you're probably talking somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000
For the
A
parcel
resident.
tax.
for 30 years to raise $200 million in a bond. You first issue the bonds up front. But there are good things happening occasionally, and I don't know where the council would be in something like that, but I certainly want to raise it as a possibility.
Well, it's something we want to keep in the backs of our minds and watch very closely and see whether something like this begins to make sense.
If that sales tax passes and they do get the money, that certainly should put
Well,
pressure on us.
Then it would get our attention almost immediately.
Yeah.
Is that trench supposed to be for Caltrain only, whether or not high-speed rail comes?
They didn't discuss, they're worried about fatalities, and that was the point I raised. I said, we're gonna set a record this year, to be the highest year ever, when Caltrain will kill over 20 people. And then whether they're suicide or not, I think that is totally unacceptable. And one guy out of Santa Clara, they pulled some guy out of the car. He was drunk.
You mentioned that they didn't, what if it didn't pass or that they didn't get on the expenditure plan? You said it failed.
They passed, and all the money they were promised went to BART. And, you know, they're in the north part of the county, and the south part of the county, mainly San Jose, is getting all the funds, even though they were promised. It's kind of, we know, we're the kind of the orphan, we know what that feels like.
Well, it's like Northern California versus Southern California, it's the same process. They have the votes. And they
That's
get
right.
money.
That's right.
Was it on their expenditure plan for the sales tax? Do you know?
Say again?
Was it on their expenditure plan to do that project?
Well, not, the new one will be.
Okay, but was that one before?
No, before there was going to be for, I think it was, I don't know, was it grade separation at university or, I can't remember what it was, but they talked about what it was and they didn't get any of the money. They were promised. So, they're not, it's Liz is, it was on the board back then, but she's gone off and come back. She was there, so she remembers, and she's the one that proposed a separate sales tax. If they didn't get it this time, that they would, you know, just succeed from the county and have their own sales tax.
Well, that'll be a trick.
So, I mean, that's what California should do, and we should stop financing the East Coast liberals. Huh?
Is that on the
Perhaps
agenda?
Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Atherton could form their own county.
That's right.
Secession?
I don't know, but it was a good week.
Okay, Rosemary, do you have comments?
I don't.
Helen?
No comments there.
Jack?
No comment.
I'm good.
We've all enjoyed your comments, Craig.
But Jeff's gonna support my parcel tax.
That concludes our agenda. Would you like to make any comments? You've sat there very quietly listening while we rattled on through the evening.
No, I'm just here to, I live near the train, so
Oh,
just,
well, you're certainly welcome. You're welcome to any meeting we have. Generally, we're sitting down there, not up here.
why the change?
Speak
Planning
aloud.
commission is tomorrow night,
Tomorrow night.
so it's set up already.
Oh, I see.
I have a comment. If you're interested in what the committee's doing, we have an opening for a member, if you would want to apply, I think.
I'll think about it.
Okay, great.
Is it just go to City Hall and, or,
They'll give you an application, fill it out, and it comes to us and we look at it and off we go.
okay.
All right, well, I think the rec committee meeting is over, adjourned for tonight. Our next meeting will be, is the 5th of October?
6th.
6th of October, that's first Tuesday in October. And we look forward to seeing you all then.
It's a record, Bob.